Hello, and welcome to Leadership Trail Mix. I am Miguel Oliveira, and for the next few minutes, we'll be together looking at one of the main ingredients that compose this art and science we call people leadership. Today, I have a guest, and a very close one, Camille Romero. We worked together a few years ago. I had the privilege of working side by side with her, and since then, Camille has made the decision to open her own business. She's the founder and principal of How's It Working, a consulting firm based here in Denver. Camille, welcome to Leadership Trail Mix.
Thank you for having me, Miguel. I was very excited when we decided to do this. One, because I hadn't seen you in a long while. Two, because I love the fact you're doing a podcast that says Leadership Trail Mix, because it kind of is a trail mix. Sometimes you get this bite, sometimes you get that bite, but it's always, if you're doing it right, and I'll put that in quotes, it's always nourishing and you're excited to do it every day.
Yep, that's exactly right. You nailed it. So let's jump right into it. Using a concept I recently explored here on Leadership Trail Mix, I would love to start with this question so that you can introduce yourself. Camille, how would you describe yourself?
So it's really interesting. I went back and listened to that episode, and the way I describe myself, my identity has been shifting a lot in the last year. There's some core parts that have stayed really essential with me, right? Like, for instance, I am a Latina. I come from a rural background. I still live in Colorado. I have two sisters, so I'm a sister, I'm a wife, I'm a friend. But some other facets of my identity have really shifted. 6 months ago, you couldn't have asked me to call myself a caregiver. And now some dynamics in my family have changed, and that's become part of my identity. I used to identify as an employee, and I thought I was a good one, but now I'm a business owner, and it's so very different. So I'm an independent Latina business owner. I am also a single practitioner within my business. I'm still a friend, wife, and sister. And now I would add in caregiver. And I would say I'm much more curious.
I love that. So we decided to name this episode Human and Human, but it could very well be called From Human to Human, since we're talking about human-centric leadership. Starting with definitions, how would you define people-centric leadership, Camille?
So if I think about human-centric leadership, the premise is that we start with the idea that we are both humans, and that is always common ground. We may have different roles, we may have different responsibilities, but if you can start with connecting with the person in front of you, not with the responsibility, not with the employee or the boss, it changes the way you look at the other person. And it changes your internal endemic style, I think.
Yes, it makes so much sense. One idea related to people-centric leadership that you shared with me when we were discussing this episode, and that really resonated with me, is that a great leader can use their own humanity to connect with their employees. Can you expand on that and help us understand what, if anything, it has to do with vulnerability?
I think that's a great catch, Miguel, because being human is often the opposite of what we're taught when we're taught to be a boss, right? So you have to have all the answers. You have to be quick with decisions. You have to be, in some ways, perfect for your employees. And what I find that does, and what I encourage my leaders to explore, is how does that separate you from your employees? At our core, like I said a little bit before, we are all human, but allowing your humanity to show has a lot to do with vulnerability. Do I want them to see that I don't have all the answers? Am I willing to let my employees have the answers? Am I willing to stand there and say, look, I made a mistake and here's what I'm going to do to fix it? Absolutely. What I'm not saying about vulnerability is let's overshare, right? Know the details of everything that happens to me. But it really connects us and it makes a better team if I can say, you know what? I think you have a better idea than I do. Let's run with that. Let's explore it. It doesn't have to always get implemented. But one of the smartest things, and I think it has a lot to do with vulnerability and a lot with human-centric leadership, that I was told early in my career is hire people smarter than you. If you can admit that they're smarter than you, what a team you're going to have. But it does require some vulnerability, to your point. I am really great at a lot of things, but what I like to say is I'm not the expert at much. I have a lot of expertise and I've got a lot of tools, but Miguel, you have other tools that are better and you use them differently. And so how can we bring our toolkits together and with a little bit of humility, admit that we could make a better house if we use all the tools, as opposed to I'll do this part, you do that part, right? So it has a lot to do with vulnerability for sure.
This is so powerful. It feels like you're just flipping the script on leadership, just kind of helping us see a side of it that I don't think a lot of us were taught in the corporate environment or even in business school or anywhere, to be honest.
Yeah, what I think is most interesting is it's almost a throwback. So I don't know how many of your listeners have heard of Stephen Covey, but he was one of the old school gurus, right? And one of the things that he talked about a lot in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is creating synergies. How do we connect with people? And so it's not taught, but I really don't know why. It's a basic premise. The more connected you are, the better you function together.
Yeah, I'm going to touch on something that you mentioned, tools. So, as a coach, what are the tools and techniques you provide and discuss with your clients when it comes to people-centric leadership?
There's a lot of techniques that I talk about. One of them is leading with curiosity. Figure out what happened. Try to understand where other people are. What are they thinking? Which leads to the next thing, which is listening deeply. If you're listening to respond, you aren't really listening. You're cherry picking the things that people are saying to make the response. How can you listen and then repeat back? Did I get you right? Do I really understand you? And then do your best to respond, not react. Reaction happens in a split second, but it's not always our best version of ourselves. And so how can you take that deep breath and go, okay, here's what I want to say, right? And then in terms of tools, there's a lot of things that I think work really well. The word yet, when you're thinking about taking something on or you're working with an employee that maybe hasn't mastered something, instead of saying they don't get it, you can say they don't get it yet. And that yet opens the possibility that they can get it. Maybe they just need something else, right? I also ask my leaders to come up with a safe word, very different than 50 Shades of Gray, right? My safe word is curious. I tend to be a very direct person and I can get very inquisitive and all of a sudden I'm interrogating you, right? What happened? Why did it happen? Why did you think that? That is a very different approach than, hey, I'm curious about what happened yesterday. Can we talk about it? And when I say that word, I actually feel a shift in my mind and in my body. My posture even changes. So how can we find the word that allows you to shift? And then the last tool that I use with almost all my leaders when I coach is the if-then plan. Let's explore what the challenge might be. Okay, if that happens, then what are you going to do? It kind of eases the anxiety about the unknown because you're like, oh, I have a plan, and your brain can, and your heart can kind of relax and be in the moment to respond, not react.
These are great tools. Thanks for sharing with us. I know this might sound a little weird, but I personally don't think it is impossible. What can a leader do if an employee is resistant to people-centric leadership?
So I think that makes the assumption that human-centric leadership is just one thing. And I don't think that I have ever said or advised or coached a leader to talk about human-centric leadership. It's really about connecting with people as opposed to a style, right? So for me, it all goes back to, again, like, get curious. What is it about your approach that isn't landing with that employee? Can you be open enough to say, hey, I feel like we're disconnected. Can we check in? For myself as a leader, one of the things I do with new folks is I'll sit down and talk to them and say, we all tend to give what we need, right? So as a leader, if I'm giving you something, that's because that's what I'd like to get from my leader. However, not everybody wants the same things. So what do you want from your leader? There's also a bit of vulnerability involved in that question because what if you're not good at giving what they need, right? Can you say, I'm going to need to practice. Will you help me? But I don't think it's a resistance so much to the human-centric. I think that it's jumping in, allowing yourself to be human, and getting really curious about what do they need? Why are they resisting you? What is it about your approach? Is it them? Is it you? Is it the situation? Who knows? But find out, get curious.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. This next question is very much related to what you just said because you're right. I think people hear people-centric leadership and they want to put it in the box of leadership styles.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I feel like more and more people are being invited to lead without authority. What recommendations would you give to leaders who do not have direct reports but still have to lead? How can they tap into people-centric leadership to do better?
That's a great question because most of my leadership experience has been influence-based. It's not so much for me a leadership style as a way of moving through the world. So when you think about being human-centric, people-centric, I do that with my family as well as doing it at work. Partially because I don't have a hard line between family and work, even when I was an employee before I owned my own business. Who I am carries through as a straight line through every facet. And so in terms of influence, it's understanding, again, get curious. What do they need? Why do you need them? How can you make it important to them? Do they have competing priorities? Do you need to talk to their boss to say, hey, can we work this in? It has been a journey, and it continues to be a journey to evolve your influence-based leadership style. For me, it is leading genuinely, right? This is genuinely what I need from you. This is who I am. This is how we can work together. This is how it works with your work. This is how it impacts my work, right? I think it's having open lines of communication with the straight line leaders who do have the authority to set tone, tempo, etc. And I think it has to do with creating or communicating better the story of why. Why is it important? Why will this make the company better? Why will this make your job easier, their job easier? Simon Sinek was great with that concept. Start with why. Why do we want to do this? And then get into the how and the what. But again, influence-based leadership goes back to connecting, to listening, and to being willing to collaborate rather than control.
We could probably spend another 3.5 days here, huh? It's going to become a retreat. But as you know, we always end our episodes with a call to action. So what would you recommend to any leader who wants to start their people-centric leadership journey today?
Go online and look for powerful questions. Powerful questions start with what, where, when, how, and they invite others to talk to you. They are not yes or no questions. They require a conversation. Get comfortable with those and then start using them. Genuinely ask the questions to understand what's happening. And you'll find that you become more human-centric because now you've got a vested interest in them and they have a vested interest in you. And you're creating a partnership, not just a business relationship.
Absolutely. That's amazing. Camille Romero, thank you. Thank you so much for being part of Leadership Trail Mix today.
Miguel Oliveira, thank you for letting me.
And that's all for today, folks. If you have any questions, thoughts about this episode, or just want to chat, send me an email. Miguel@leadershiptrailmix.com. Thank you for listening. Take care and talk soon.